The white colonial house stood still in the early morning mist, its two-story frame blending into the quiet of the June dawn. The well-kept roses in the front garden, deep pink Queen Elizabeths and pure white icebergs, swayed slightly in the soft breeze, their petals catching the golden light of sunrise. Dew clung to the leaves, glistening as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the glass windows, casting delicate patterns on the hardwood floors inside. It was the kind of peaceful morning that made everything feel steady, predictable. But not everything was. Inside, Linda was already moving through her morning routine with the same practiced efficiency she applied to everything in life. At 33, she had the composed demeanor of someone who had always lived up to expectations. She reached for a white ceramic mug, filling it with the rich aroma of freshly brewed Starbucks dark roast. In the toaster, whole wheat bread popped up, and she spread a thin layer of organic butter over it with careful precision. A bowl of yogurt topped with fresh blueberries sat next to it, a perfectly balanced breakfast for her husband, Thomas, as always. She dressed methodically, slipping on a tailored navy jacket over a cream blouse from Nordstrom. Her black hair was neatly arranged, and small pearl earrings added the final touch. As an accountant at a well-regarded financial firm, professionalism was second nature to her. But beneath her polished exterior, hidden away in the vanity drawer of their bedroom, were neatly arranged bottles of fertility medication. 2 years of treatments. 2 years of trying. The process had drained her physically and mentally, but she kept going, refusing to let the weight of it show. Upstairs, Thomas was already seated at his desk, staring at the glow of his computer screen. His job as an IT consultant meant he worked from home most days, alone with his thoughts. He had always been reserved, quiet, the kind of man who preferred the company of numbers over people. But lately, Linda had sensed something else, a growing distance. Their marriage looked solid from the outside, but the strain of fertility treatments lingered in the spaces between them. The long silences at the dinner table. The weekends that used to be spent going out together, now reduced to small talk over coffee. Thomas buried himself in work. Linda busied herself keeping everything in order. And then Caitlin moved in. Linda's younger sister arrived on a rainy Sunday afternoon, dragging a single suitcase and a designer leather tote bag. Gone was the confident, carefree attitude she had always carried. Divorce had stripped her of everything. Her husband's failed real estate investments had left them in financial ruin. When the debts became overwhelming, he vanished, leaving her alone to deal with the mess. The luxury condominium, the lifestyle, the security, it was all gone. "I just need to stay for a while," Caitlin had said, her usual arrogance subdued. The once flawless designer dress she wore looked a little faded, the edges of her perfectly curated image starting to fray. She was not used to being in a position of needing help. It was almost unsettling to see her like that. For the first few weeks, Caitlin played the role of the grateful guest. She woke up early, helped with small household tasks, and spent her days scrolling through job listings with growing anxiety. She rarely complained, never made a scene. But as time passed, something began to shift. She started to notice things. The way the house was perfectly maintained, every corner arranged with quiet stability. The carefully managed finances that kept things running smoothly. The ease with which Linda seemed to hold everything together, her career, her marriage, her home. The fact that this house, the one they had both grown up in, now legally belonged to Linda. It had always been this way. Linda, the responsible one. The one their parents trusted. The one who never made mistakes. Caitlin had spent her entire life in her sister's shadow, never quite measuring up, always being compared. Now, after losing everything, she was back under Linda's roof, watching from the outside again. At first, she tried to ignore it, telling herself it was temporary. But the feeling grew, slow and steady, creeping under her skin like something inevitable. The resentment she thought she had left behind was still there, waiting. And then, almost imperceptibly, things started to change. The changes started small, almost unnoticeable at first. While Linda left early for work, Caitlin began making brunch for Thomas, putting together fresh salads with organic vegetables from Whole Foods, blending homemade smoothies, and setting the table as if she had always been part of the routine. Thomas, who had been growing lonelier working from home, started looking forward to these small gestures of care. Gradually, Caitlin took on more of the household tasks, and the atmosphere of the home began to shift. Her approach to housework was more casual, spontaneous. She didn't just clean, she made the space feel lighter, easier. It wasn't long before Thomas started relying on her presence. On weekends, the three of them would go shopping at Target or browse Whole Foods, but without realizing it, Caitlin had become the center of every conversation. Linda started to feel the shift. When she got home from work, dinner was already prepared, but the meals were different, unfamiliar. The conversations between her husband and her sister seemed to flow effortlessly, filled with inside jokes and shared moments she hadn't been a part of. The home, once a place of comfort, now felt off balance. The strain of fertility treatments had already been wearing Linda down: long clinic visits, hormone injections, the relentless cycle of hope followed by disappointment. Home was supposed to be where she recovered from it all. Instead, she found herself withdrawing further. Mornings became quieter. At breakfast, Thomas would barely glance up from his coffee before retreating to his office. At dinner, Caitlin carried most of the conversation, and when Linda tried to join in, it felt like she was intruding. Weekends, once a time for Linda and Thomas to reconnect, started looking different too. The brunch dates they used to enjoy together faded away, replaced by Caitlin's suggestions to visit farmers' markets or new organic cafes. The church services they attended every Sunday soon became just Caitlin and Thomas going together, with Linda left at home, too exhausted from her treatments to go. The house itself still looked the same: the neatly arranged furniture, the well-kept garden, everything in its place. But the dynamics had shifted. There was an ease between Thomas and Caitlin, a familiarity that had formed in the hours they spent alone together. Coffee breaks during the day turned into shared moments that Linda wasn't part of. Small changes, quiet changes, but they all pointed towards something building beneath the surface. Evenings became unbearable. They would sit in the living room together, the television on but nobody really watching. Linda pretended to focus on work emails, Thomas scrolled through his phone, and Caitlin lazily flipped through magazines. The weight of unspoken words filled the air. They were all aware of the growing tension, but no one addressed it. The person most affected by it all was Linda, yet she had no one to turn to. She couldn't burden her parents, who were happily settled in their retirement home. She hesitated to talk to friends. How could she explain that her own sister, fresh from a divorce, was now unsettling her marriage? Meanwhile, Caitlin's quiet resentment toward Linda had been festering. She had always felt like the lesser sister, the one who could never measure up. And now, watching Linda live the life she had lost, the stable home, the husband, the security, something inside her twisted. What had started as quiet jealousy was beginning to evolve into something else. A plan. That morning had started like any other. Linda woke up before the alarm, showered, did her makeup, and prepared breakfast for Thomas as usual. Everything was routine, except for one thing: an unshakable feeling that something was off. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt the urge to leave for work earlier than usual. At the accounting firm, the day passed as it always did, checking financial reports, answering client emails, mentoring new employees. But her focus wasn't there. By lunchtime, she realized Thomas hadn't messaged her at all. Even as their texts had become less frequent, he had always sent small messages. At 3 p.m., Linda made a rare decision: she requested to leave early. It wasn't something she normally did. She told herself it was because of the exhaustion from treatments, but deep down, she knew that wasn't the real reason. As she stepped out of the office, her usual confident stride felt heavy, and the drive home felt longer than usual. When she pulled up to their quiet Upper Arlington home, her heartbeat quickened. Even the scent of the roses, usually comforting, felt overwhelming. Standing at the door, she hesitated, staring at the engraved nameplate that read, "Wilson." She took a breath, turned the knob, and stepped inside. The house was silent. Then she saw them. Thomas was sitting on the couch, Caitlin right beside him. The air between them felt charged, their body language too familiar, too comfortable. Their expressions weren't of guilt, but something else, something almost defiant. The clock on the wall read 4 p.m. normally. The three of them would never be together at this time of day. "Welcome home, big sister." Caitlin's voice was sweet, but there was something in the way she said it that sent a chill down Linda's spine. Linda's hands tightened at her sides. The tension in the room was suffocating. "We need to talk," Caitlin said, her tone calm but deliberate. Thomas didn't say a word. Linda already knew. Caitlin sat there with a smirk that sent a chill down Linda's spine. Then, with a voice dripping in triumph, she delivered the words that shattered the silence. "I am pregnant with Thomas's child." The weight of those words crashed over the room. "You are nothing but a barren failure," Caitlin sneered. "This house belongs to us now. You should just leave." Linda's fingers curled at her sides, but her expression remained composed. Thomas, as if he had rehearsed the moment, added, "It is because of you that we could not have a child. We should get a divorce." Everything Linda had been sensing for weeks suddenly aligned. It was all falling into place, the tension, the avoidance, the whispers. She took a slow breath before speaking. "About that child." The moment those words left her mouth, the air in the room shifted. Linda's voice was calm but sharp. "Caitlin, are you actually pregnant?" Caitlin's confident expression faltered for just a second. Linda kept going, her voice unwavering. "Last week, I found a pregnancy test box in the trash. But there was no used test inside. And yet you keep buying menstrual products every month." Caitlin's face stiffened. "You wake up at night acting like you have morning sickness, but the next morning, you eat eggs and bacon like nothing happened. That is not how morning sickness works." Thomas turned to Caitlin, his expression shifting from certainty to doubt. Linda pressed on. "Your food preferences have not changed at all, and your so-called morning sickness only happens when I am around. But during the day, when you are alone with Thomas, you are perfectly fine." The words sliced through the room. Thomas's brows furrowed, and for the first time, he looked at Caitlin with uncertainty. Linda delivered the final blow. "Thomas, why don't you check for yourself?" His breath hitched as he hesitated, staring at Caitlin. Slowly, he reached out toward her stomach. And then it happened. A soft cushion tumbled from under Caitlin's dress, rolling onto the floor like a discarded prop. The silence was suffocating. Thomas staggered back, his face strained of color. Caitlin opened her mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. Her entire scheme had just unraveled in front of them. Linda stood motionless, watching them both. The golden light of the setting sun caught her wedding ring, making it glimmer faintly. Memories of the life she had built in this house flashed through her mind, each one now tainted by betrayal. Thomas kept glancing between Caitlin and Linda, his face full of disbelief. I wanted a family. When Caitlin told me about the baby, I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought I could finally have a child of my own." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line as he continued. "You were always tired from treatments. And with Caitlin, I was not alone anymore. I thought we could have a baby together." His voice trembled. "But this is different." Caitlin's voice broke through the air, desperate and shrill. "We love each other. Yes, I lied about the baby, but my feelings for Thomas are real." Thomas sank onto the sofa, his hands gripping his head. "I have been deceived this whole time. What have I done?" Linda's voice was steady when she spoke. "That is enough." The room went still. Her words carried a finality that neither of them could fight against. "Thomas, you were just looking for an escape from the pressure of our fertility treatments. And Caitlin, you wanted to destroy me to make yourself feel whole." Either of them responded. There was nothing left to say. The ticking of the living room clock filled the silence, marking the weight of their choices. Then, After what felt like forever, Caitlin's voice came out in a whisper, stripped of its usual arrogance. I always admired you. Her gaze dropped to the cushion lying on the floor, the symbol of her deception. You were always perfect, she continued, her voice cracking. In school, at work, in marriage. Mom and Dad always said Linda would have done it this way. And me? I was never enough. Tears ran down her face, but even through them, the resentment in her eyes had not fully disappeared. When I came back here, I told myself I would take everything from you, she admitted. Your home. Your happiness. This house. I was going to make it mine. She confessed it all, the way she preyed on Thomas's loneliness, the way she made him depend on her, the way she faked her pregnancy to push Linda over the edge. And, in the end, how she planned to claim the house for herself, as if it would erase her own failures. Thomas remained slumped forward, his face buried in his hands. Linda, I am sorry, he murmured. I wanted to escape the stress of our treatments, but I never knew Caitlin was lying about the pregnancy. His voice was thick with regret. I believed her. Linda listened in silence. Then she rose to her feet. She had made her decision. You both have until tomorrow to get out. Her voice was calm, unwavering. She had nothing more to say to either of them. Linda made the call to her parents at First Community Village, her voice steady as she explained everything that had happened. On the other end of the line, her mother let out a long sigh. Caitlin, I never thought she would go this far, she said, disappointment laced in her tone. Her father, however, had little patience for sympathy. You made the right decision, Linda. That house is yours, and Caitlin has no right to set foot in it again. Their unwavering support brought her some comfort, but there were still many things she had to face. There would be questions from extended family, especially during Thanksgiving gatherings, where uncles and cousins would undoubtedly press for details. The truth had to be told, but carefully. Family reputation still mattered. And then there were the neighbors. Upper Arlington was a quiet, tight-knit community, but word traveled fast. Whispers about sisterly betrayal and an unfaithful husband had already begun circulating. Attending Sunday service at First Community Church would be uncomfortable for a while, and running into the neighborhood wives while shopping at Trant Center would come with unavoidable stares and hushed murmurs. But Linda had already made up her mind. She would not hide. She would not shrink. She would hold her head high and keep moving forward. The divorce proceedings with Thomas moved forward without resistance. He did not contest the house, perhaps his way of making amends. Caitlin had packed up and moved to Dayton, where a family friend had offered her a place to stay. She would not be coming back. That was the result of her own choices. During a visit to her parents, her mother took Linda's hand and squeezed it gently. You have so many possibilities ahead of you. Linda nodded. Her mother was right. This was not an ending, it was the start of something new. The roses in her garden continued to bloom, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of changing seasons. Morning sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow inside the home. The air felt different now, lighter, as if the house itself had exhaled a long-held breath. It would take time to heal, but she could take that time, one step at a time, one day at a time. 3 months passed. Autumn had settled into Upper Arlington, painting the trees in fiery reds and deep golds. Linda's life, too, had begun to take on new shape. The divorce had gone through smoothly. Thomas had accepted a transfer to Seattle, starting over with a new job at a local IT firm. When they signed the final papers, he had spoken just once. I am sorry for everything, Linda. But maybe this is for the best. His belongings were packed up, carried away by movers. The furniture they had picked out together, the wedding albums, she stored them away in the attic. She did not need reminders of a life that no longer existed. Her parents had helped finalize the paperwork for the house. Her father, ever the planner, had already made arrangements with a lawyer. This home is yours now, he told her. Take care of it. And yourself? With renewed focus, Linda threw herself into her career. Her hard work paid off. She was selected to lead a new project at the firm, a promotion that came with a well-earned raise. Financial independence was no longer just a goal. It was her reality. And Caitlin? She had settled into her new life in Dayton, working as an office clerk at a small real estate firm. Their parents had made it clear there would be no reconciliation. She was no longer welcome in the family home. Her name would not be on the Christmas card list. One afternoon, as Linda tended to her garden, her next-door neighbor, Sarah, called over the fence. "Do you think you will ever see Caitlin again?" Linda carefully pruned a rose, considering the question before answering. "I think it is time for us to walk our own paths." Life gradually returned to normal. She resumed attending church. Though the first few Sundays were filled with curious glances, the congregation welcomed her back with warmth. The pastor's sermon that day struck a chord. God gives us trials, but beyond them, there is always light. She found herself embracing the little joys in life, lingering over coffee at Starbucks, taking her time selecting fresh ingredients at Whole Foods. Even the quiet of an empty house, which once felt suffocating, now felt peaceful. Rumors trickled in about Thomas. He had settled into his new job, started fresh in Seattle. Oddly, Linda felt nothing about it, not anger, not sadness. Just acceptance. She visited her parents every weekend, sharing quiet moments over her mother's homemade cookies. Each visit brought a little more healing, a little more peace. One morning, while walking through her garden, she noticed new buds forming on her roses. Even after harsh seasons, new life still emerged. And that was what she was doing, too, growing, healing, becoming something new. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by marriage or expectations. She redecorated the house, filling it with things she truly loved. She hung paintings from her favorite artists, rearranged furniture, and made the space entirely her own. At night, she would sit by the window, watching the stars. Life was unpredictable. It did not always go the way she had planned. But she had learned that did not mean it could not still be beautiful. Tomorrow would come, bringing with it new possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, Linda was ready.